On my wedding day, my fiancé forced me to wear his mother's 15-year-old dress. When I refused, he slapped me hard, and I fell to the floor, with his mother watching and controlling every move. She had the audacity to say, "How dare you defy me?" That was the last straw. I left the event and sought revenge. Within 24 hours, they were both behind bars. My name is Nancy Carter, and I'm 27 years old. I grew up in Atlantic City, New Jersey, where everything seemed pretty normal until it wasn't. I met Jacob Walker 5 years ago, and it felt like fate. He was charming, attentive, and we just clicked. At first, I thought he was the person I was meant to spend the rest of my life with. He felt like home. We had so many dreams together. Our relationship was perfect, or at least I thought it was. In May 2023, after almost 5 years of being together, Jacob proposed. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. I never imagined my engagement would be the start of something beautiful, a new chapter filled with love and family. We were planning to get married in June 2024, and I couldn't wait to start this next chapter. But things started changing even before the wedding planning began. At first, I thought I was just being overly excited, but Jacob became more and more distant. I was so caught up in the idea of the wedding, picking out the dress, choosing colors, and planning the entire event, but Jacob didn't seem to care. He was always busy, always distracted. Every time I showed him pictures or asked for his opinion, he just responded with a quick, "Looks good," or sent a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. His indifference was more than just a lack of interest in the wedding. It felt like he was pulling away from me in every way. But what made it worse was his mother, Margaret. I didn't notice it at first. I thought it was sweet how close they were. She would call him multiple times a day, asking for his thoughts on everything, from what he should have for lunch to bigger life decisions. I remember thinking it was a bit much, but I didn't mind. I figured it was just a part of who he was, that he was a mama's boy, and that was fine. But as the months passed, I began to see the cracks in our relationship, and I started feeling like I was competing with her for his attention. I should have known something was wrong when I showed him my wedding dress. I had spent hours choosing it. Perfectly elegant, classic, the one I had dreamed of for so long. I was so excited to share the moment with him. I sent him a picture, hoping he would be as excited as I was, but his response was underwhelming. "It looks beautiful," he texted. That was all. But what I didn't know was that he had immediately sent the photo to his mother, and that's when everything began to fall apart. The next day, I received a call from Jacob, telling me that his mother had seen the dress and was very upset. I couldn't understand why. Margaret wanted me to wear her wedding dress, the one she had worn 15 years ago. She insisted it was tradition, that it was important to her. I was stunned. I had never agreed to wear her dress, never promised to do that. I had only made a passing comment years ago about how beautiful it was, but that didn't mean I was bound to it. When I tried to talk to Jacob about it, he didn't take my side. He acted like it wasn't a big deal, saying, "Mom's just upset, Nancy. Can't you make her happy?" I was so hurt. Why was I the one who had to sacrifice my happiness for his mother's? He said he just wanted to avoid conflict, but I wasn't the one causing the conflict. Margaret was. What really got to me was that Jacob didn't even stand up for me. He didn't defend my choice to wear the dress I loved. Instead, he acted like it was just another thing I was being unreasonable about. He was so concerned with keeping the peace with his mother that he completely disregarded my feelings. I kept telling myself that once we got married, everything would change. I convinced myself it was just a phase, that maybe he was just under pressure. But I was wrong. The wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I had been waiting for this moment for so long. I had spent so many hours planning, from the venue to the flowers, the music, and everything in between. But as I stood in front of the mirror in my beautiful gown, ready to start my day, Jacob walked in holding Margaret's old dress. His face was serious, his tone firm. "Darling, you'll wear this dress today," he said, his voice cold. I was in shock. I couldn't believe it. He was telling me to wear her dress, not mine. The one I had chosen, the one I had dreamed about. The dress I had spent months picking out. I felt humiliated, but I also felt betrayed. This is what my mother wants, he added, as if that made it okay. I couldn't believe my ears. I was crushed. I tried to explain, tried to reason with him. Jacob, this isn't what I want. I've spent so much time picking out my dress, and it's what I feel beautiful in. Please understand. But he didn't listen. Then came the moment that changed everything. His expression darkened, and before I could say anything else, he slapped me, hard, across my face. I was stunned. The shock of it sent me crashing to the floor. His mother was watching, standing there, her face cold and triumphant. She had won. She was in control. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Jacob, the man I had loved for so long, the man I had trusted, had just struck me in front of his mother. The slap was painful, yes, but the emotional hurt was even worse. I felt so small, so insignificant. I had spent so many years believing in him, in us, and in that moment, it all came crashing down. Margaret's voice echoed in the room, her tone cold and calculated. If you don't obey my orders, you cannot marry my son. That was it. That was the moment I knew it was over. I was done. Without saying another word, I turned around and walked out. I couldn't be in that house, that relationship, any longer. I had to leave. There was nothing left for me there. My life had become a lie. As I walked out the door, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I had lost everything I thought I had, but I knew one thing. I had to protect myself. I couldn't stay in that toxic environment, and I couldn't let Jacob and his mother get away with what they had done. The betrayal was too deep. That was the beginning of my journey to reclaim my life, but I didn't know just how far I would have to go to get the justice I deserved. The next steps would be painful, but I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. I walked out of that house with nothing but the clothes on my back, my heart racing, and my mind in turmoil. I couldn't understand how it had all gone so wrong. Jacob had never been like this before. Yes, he had always been close to his mother, but I thought that was just a part of who he was. I never imagined it would come to this. But as I stood outside, shaking, the reality hit me. This wasn't just a bad day. It was the end of everything I had believed in. I called my brother, Michael, the only person who had always supported me no matter what. He answered on the first ring, and I could hear the worry in his voice. Nancy? Where are you? What happened? I was barely holding myself together. Michael, I need you. I left. I had to leave. Within minutes, Michael was at my side. His face showed a mix of anger and concern, but he didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around me, offering the only thing he could, his support. You did the right thing, Em. No one should ever make you feel like that. I stayed with him that night. I didn't want to be alone. I was broken, devastated, and full of questions. What had happened to Jacob? What had happened to the man I loved? But I couldn't let myself stay in that place of hurt forever. I wasn't going to let Jacob or his mother control me anymore. I had to do something that would make them understand that I wasn't a doormat, that I wasn't someone they could trample over. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything that had happened, the slap, the humiliation. I kept thinking about how Margaret had orchestrated the entire thing. She wasn't just controlling Jacob, she was controlling everything around her, including me. I had been nothing but a pawn in their sick little game, and I couldn't let it go. I had to make them pay. But I wasn't going to make it easy for them. I was going to take control back. The first thing I did was take a deep breath and gather my thoughts. I didn't want to act out of anger, though I was angry, so angry that I couldn't think straight. I needed to be strategic. I needed to expose the truth. And that's exactly what I did. I wrote an anonymous email detailing everything. Everything. I described how Jacob had allowed his mother to manipulate me, how he had hidden the truth about his mother's demands, and how he had slapped me on our wedding day just because I wouldn't comply with his mother's wishes. I didn't hold back. I made sure to emphasize how toxic their relationship was, how unhealthy it was for me to have been caught in the middle of it. I sent the email to everyone I could, friends, family, people I knew had been close to Jacob. I made sure they understood exactly what kind of man he was and what kind of influence his mother had over him. I wanted them to see the truth, to see the side of Jacob that I had seen, the side of him that had been hidden behind his charming facade. But that wasn't enough. I needed to make sure they didn't get away with it. I had discovered something during our relationship that I hadn't paid much attention to at the time. Jacob was involved in some shady business deals, illegal import-export activities that I had stumbled upon one night when I was going through his things. I had kept quiet about it, thinking it wasn't my place, but now it was my weapon. I couldn't let him keep getting away with it, not after what he had done to me. I contacted the authorities and anonymously tipped them off about Jacob's involvement in the illegal activities. I gave them the evidence I had, everything I knew, and let them take it from there. It felt empowering. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something right, something that would finally bring justice. The next few days were a blur. I spent my time processing everything, talking to Michael, and trying to piece together the parts of my life that had been shattered. I knew Jacob and his mother would try to fight back, but I wasn't afraid. I wasn't going to let them win. I had already lost so much, but I was determined not to lose myself. Meanwhile, the email I sent had caused a stir. People began to talk. Jacob's friends, his family, they started to question him, to wonder what kind of person he had become. The truth was out there now, and no matter how hard Jacob tried to defend himself, the damage had been done. I wasn't the only one who knew about his mother's control over him. Everyone was starting to see it. As for Margaret, I could only imagine the chaos she must have been causing behind the scenes. She must have been furious. But I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I had to protect myself. I had to show the world that I was strong, that I wouldn't let her or Jacob dictate my life anymore. The police investigation into Jacob's illegal activities moved quickly. Within a few weeks, both Jacob and his mother were arrested. The charges against them were serious, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had tried to break me, to control me, but I had fought back. And in the end, I had won. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice, and it was about reclaiming my life. I had been manipulated for so long, but now I was free. I had taken back my power, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me again. The days after Jacob and Margaret's arrest were a strange mix of relief and disbelief. On one hand, I couldn't believe that everything had finally come to an end, but on the other hand, it felt almost surreal to know that the people who had hurt me so deeply were finally facing the consequences of their actions. The moment I heard the news that Jacob and his mother were both behind bars, a wave of emotions washed over me. I felt anger, but it wasn't the furious kind of anger that had consumed me right after the wedding. It was the kind of anger that came from years of being manipulated, of being forced into a corner, and of realizing how much time I had wasted. I had let them control me for so long, but now I was free. I didn't celebrate their downfall, but there was a sense of closure in knowing they could no longer hurt me, no longer hold any power over me. It wasn't about getting revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the life I deserved. I was done being a pawn in their twisted game. But even though the legal battle was over, the emotional toll it had taken on me wasn't something I could just erase. I was still processing everything that had happened, trying to make sense of how I had let myself get so deep into a relationship with someone who had no respect for me. I thought I had known Jacob, but I had only seen the version of him that he wanted me to see. The real Jacob, the one who let his mother control every aspect of his life, was someone I never wanted to know. I took time for myself after everything went down. I stayed with Michael for a while longer, just trying to heal and find my footing again. I wasn't ready to dive back into the world, not yet. I needed space, time to breathe, and figure out who I was without Jacob. I had to remind myself that I was more than just his fiancé, more than just someone who had been manipulated by his mother. I had to rediscover who I was, what I wanted, and what I deserved. During this time, I also started going to therapy. At first, I wasn't sure it would help. I didn't want to talk about what had happened, didn't want to dig through all the pain and betrayal. But as I began to unpack my emotions, I realized how much I had ignored over the years. I had made so many compromises for Jacob, put aside my own happiness, and neglected my own needs. I had allowed his mother to dictate our relationship, and I had let Jacob walk all over me without standing up for myself. Therapy gave me the tools to understand why I had let it happen, and more importantly, how I could avoid repeating the same mistakes in the future. I also started focusing on rebuilding my life. I went back to the hobbies I had put aside for so long, things I loved but had sacrificed for the relationship. I spent more time with friends, the ones who had supported me through everything, and I reconnected with my family. Michael, especially, was my rock. He had been there every step of the way, and his unwavering support meant the world to me. But even as I started to heal, there were moments when I would feel the weight of everything that had happened. The emotional scars didn't disappear overnight, and the pain still lingered. I kept thinking about the woman I was before Jacob, the one who had been full of dreams and hope. I had lost that version of myself for a while, but now I was starting to find her again. One of the hardest things to accept was that I had to let go of the idea of what my life could have been. I had imagined a future with Jacob, one filled with love, family, and shared dreams. But that future had been built on lies and manipulation. And as painful as it was, I had to let go of it in order to move forward. It was the only way I could truly heal. Despite everything, I felt stronger now. The woman I was becoming was more self-aware, more resilient, and more in control of her own destiny. I had learned to trust myself again, and I wasn't going to settle for anything less than what I deserved. Jacob and his mother had tried to destroy me, but in the end, I had found my way back to myself. And so I moved forward not with anger, but with strength. They had lost their hold on me, and I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it held. I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not someone like Jacob, take away my happiness again. As the weeks passed, I began to feel a sense of peace settling over me. It wasn't immediate and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally living for myself, not for anyone else. The heavy burden of trying to please Jacob and his controlling mother was gone, and I could finally breathe again. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living. I started doing things for myself, things I had neglected for so long. I enrolled in an art class that I had always wanted to take, but had put off. I started hiking in the nearby woods, something I used to love but had given up to accommodate Jacob's busy schedule. I reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during my time with him, and I found that they were still there for me, still supporting me in ways that meant more than I could ever explain. But there were moments when I would still feel a pang of sadness. The life I had imagined with Jacob, the weddings, the family, the future, was no longer possible. It was gone. And as much as I had moved on, those moments of loss still crept up on me, especially when I saw happy couples or when I'd hear his name mentioned. I couldn't help but feel that ache in my chest. But I also realized that the pain was a reminder of how far I had come, how much I had grown. One day, I received a letter. It was from Jacob's father, a man I had never really known. I had met him a few times during family gatherings, but he was always distant, never fully involved. I hadn't expected anything from him. But the letter he sent was unexpected. It wasn't a plea to take Jacob back or to forgive him. Instead, it was an apology. He acknowledged the pain his son had caused me and expressed his regret for not being more present to stop the toxic relationship that had developed between Jacob and his mother. I read that letter over and over, and for the first time since everything had happened, I felt a small sense of closure. It wasn't from Jacob, and it wasn't what I had hoped for, but it was something. It was an acknowledgement that the abuse I had suffered hadn't been my fault. That small gesture from his father gave me peace in a way I never expected. As time went on, I continued to heal. I went on a trip to Paris with my best friend, Laura, who had stuck by me through it all. What was supposed to be my honeymoon became an unforgettable sisterhood adventure. We wandered through the streets, ate delicious food, and laughed more than I had in years. It wasn't the romantic escape I had once dreamed of with Jacob, but it was better than anything I could have imagined. It reminded me that there were still beautiful, meaningful moments waiting for me. When I returned from Paris, I took a long, hard look at my life. I realized that, for the first time, I wasn't focused on what I had lost. I was focused on what I had gained: freedom, strength, and the ability to trust myself again. I never fully understood why Jacob had turned into the person he had, why he had allowed his mother's control to seep into every corner of our relationship. But I realized that the answers didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had taken back my life. I had chosen myself, and that was the most empowering decision I had ever made. The final piece of closure came when I sold the engagement ring, the one that had once held so much hope and promise. I didn't want to keep it as a reminder of the past. I sold it and donated the money to a domestic violence shelter. It felt like I was turning something painful into something good, something that could help others. I was stronger now, more resilient, and more in control of my own future. Jacob and his mother were in the past, and I had no intention of ever looking back. I had learned that true happiness comes from within, and it wasn't something anyone else could give me. As I moved forward, I knew that when I was ready to open my heart again, I would do it on my terms. But for now, I was content. I had rebuilt my life, step by step, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready for whatever it had to offer.